Hello everyone, my name is Miranda Arnold and I'm a psychology major here at William Patterson University. Today I will be presenting on Dr. Ulric Neisser, a man who has been called the father of cognitive psychology. Let's begin with a timeline of Neisser's life. Ulric Neisser was born in Kiel, Germany on December 8, 1928. His father foresaw Hitler's coming militarism and made the decision to move his family to the United States, arriving in New York on September 15, 1933, when Neisser was nearly 5 years old. He would go on to graduate from Harvard in 1950 and fulfill his master's at Swarthmore. He then returned to Harvard to finish his doctorate in psychology in 1956, presenting his dissertation in the subfield of psychophysics. Despite his interest in taking a cognitive approach to psychology, Neisser felt stuck in behaviorism, as it was the zeitgeist of the time. Thankfully, Neisser's first academic job that following year was at Brandeis University, where the psychology department chair was Abraham Maslow. At the time, Maslow was moving away from his own behaviorist training to develop a humanistic approach to the field, and provided Neisser the opportunity to pursue his interest in cognitive experimentation. In 1960, he would work alongside Oliver Selfridge to publish their work on the pandemonium model, which would lay the first bricks on Neisser's path to becoming a key figure in cognitive psychology. In 1967, he published his first book, Cognitive Psychology, which would found the study of mental processes into its own field. Starting in 1976, he accepted a position at Cornell University and published his second major book, Cognition and Reality, calling for a more ecological approach to psychology. In 1981, he released his famous case study analyzing John Dean's testimony in the Watergate scandal and began to shape his views on memory as a constructive process. In 1983, he would leave Cornell to found the Emory Cognition program at Emory University. In 1992, he conducted his research into flashbulb memories and debunked prominent theories of the time. In 1996, Neisser returned to Cornell University, where he would carry out the rest of his academic career. That same year, he was commissioned by the American Psychology Association to conduct research on intelligence, redefining how we understood it as a whole. Outside of his academic work, though, Neisser had a rich personal life. He was married twice with a total of 5 children, was an accomplished pianist, avid lover of music and baseball, and had a deep interest in philosophy. He would pass away on February 17, 2012, from complications due to Parkinson's disease. So let's take a moment before we dive in to look at the broader picture. What did he do? Ulric Neisser was known as the father of psychology. His work laid the foundation for modern cognitive psychology, influencing subsequent research on perception, attention, memory, and pattern recognition. In his own words, "We are not passive recipients of information. We are active constructors of our own reality." Let's start first with the pandemonium model. Credited to Oliver Selfridge, but popularized by Neisser in his early years, the pandemonium model is a theoretical bottom-up, data-driven model of visual pattern recognition. It proposes that recognition happens through a hierarchy of processing daemons, each specialized in a particular task. This was the first major alternative to template theory, proposing that we don't need to store infinite templates, but rather utilize bottom-up processing to interpret sensory data and build up to objects. This project would denote Neisser's first steps towards defining cognitive psychology. It introduced the idea that patterns are identified via feature detection and served as a precursor for future AI models. It shifted perception towards computation. Perception is not passive reception, but active interpretation based on computational processes. 7 years later, Neisser would publish his most influential book, Cognitive Psychology, which served as the foundation for the emerging field by the same name. His book defined the field and solidified the study of perception, memory, and attention as foundational research areas within cognitive psychology. Neisser also rejected the behaviorist approach. He argued that understanding how the mind interprets and transforms information is essential to explaining behavior. He emphasized the concept that cognition involves internal representations of the external world, mental models that help us interpret, remember, and act on experience. Drawing from computer science, Neisser framed cognition as a linear sequential system with clear stages, much like a computer. This model presents the mind as something that actively constructs and filters knowledge, not just reacts to the environment. It focused on internal cognitive processes studied in a controlled environment, often concerned with repeatable tasks such as recognition and recall. For example, we receive sensory input from the outside world. Attention filters what information gets through, while perception interprets it. The selected information is then encoded into short and long-term memory, whereafter we can retrieve it later to help make decisions or guide behavior. Cognitive psychology became the study of how people learn, structure, store, and use knowledge. Neisser's book named and defined the field of cognitive psychology, integrating insights from linguistics, AI, neuroscience, and philosophy to reshape how we look at the mind. It challenged the behaviorist mindset of the time and positioned humans as active interpreters of their experiences, rather than passive responders to stimuli. This began to shift focus from stimulus response learning toward an exploration of the mind as an active processor of information. It emphasized internal mental processes such as perception, attention, memory, language, problem solving, and thinking, areas that had been largely ignored by behaviorists up until that point and would inspire researchers for decades to come. Over time, Neisser began to question his own approach to studying cognition, a critique he brought to light in his next major book, Cognition and Reality. It was a critical reflection on the limitations of the very field he helped define. He argued that cognitive psychology had become too focused on controlled lab experiments and criticized the field for emphasizing abstract models of memory and perception based on contrived tasks that didn't reflect how people actually think and act in everyday life. He proposed that psychology should study cognition in natural context, believing it would result in more accurate insights. It was here that Neisser formulated the perceptual cycle model, a dynamic overhaul to his earlier linear information processing model. In this new model, we perceive what we are prepared to see. Schemas filter the world, directing attention to relevant details and suppressing others. We sample information from the environment by exploring with our eyes, bodies, and so on. When reality conflicts with expectations, the schema is revised and updated. For example, in initial learning, the child sees a furry, four-legged animal at home. The mother says, "This is a dog." The child forms a schema. Dogs are furry animals with 4 legs, a tail, and so on. Later, the child makes a generalization error when they see a cat and exclaim, "Dog!" The child is engaging in exploration, applying their existing schema or what they expect to a new situation. But the real animal is a cat, which shares some perceptual features with a dog. The mother responds, "No, that's not a dog, that's a cat." The child experiences a mismatch between their schema and the object. This feedback prompts schema revision. They refine their understanding by adding distinctions, such as cats are smaller, they meow, they have pointed ears. Next time the child sees a cat, they correctly label it as cat. This demonstrates that the updated schema now guides perception more accurately, and the perceptual cycle continues, improving with experience. Cognition and reality marked a major turning point. It introduced skepticism about overly rigid cognitive models and inspired future researchers to study cognition naturally. While his earlier work established the theoretical foundations for studying mental processes, cognition and reality challenged the direction the field had taken and argued for a more ecologically valid and real-world oriented approach to cognitive science. Though it was met with some resistance at the time, it had a massive impact on ecological psychology, influenced how we design web interfaces, aided in the design of AI, and established the fundamentals for how clinical cognitive psychologists approach treating patients today. Neisser contributed greatly to the research of memory, emphasizing that human memory does not operate like a tape recorder. He proposed we reconstruct memories from fragments guided by schemas, expectations, and current emotional states. He cautioned that the memories may feel real and vivid, but they are reconstructed over time, often inaccurately. 2 of his most influential studies involve flashbulb memories and John Dean's case study. Flashbulb memory refers to the vivid, detailed, and seemingly unforgettable memories people form during shocking or emotionally charged events such as 9/11, natural disasters, and so on. Neisser and another psychologist by the name of Harsh asked students at Emory University to write down their memories of the day after the 1986 Challenger explosion. 2.5 years later, the same students were asked to recount the event again. Only 25% of students had major details that were fully consistent. Some students confidently provided entirely incorrect memories while believing them to be accurate. During the John Dean case study, Neisser illustrated how autobiographical memory is reconstructive, selective, and shaped by meaning rather than exact detail. The study revealed that even when people are highly confident in their recollections, these memories may not be factually accurate. When recordings were released not long after John Dean's testimony on the Watergate incident, Neisser saw an opportunity to compare autobiographical memory reports to the real thing. Upon conducting his research, though, Neisser found Dean was often correct about what the conversations were about, such as themes and intentions, but not how they were said or in what exact sequence. This supported the idea that memory tends to preserve the gist of things rather than the verbatim. Neisser also performed research into how memory defines our identity. He outlined a multi-layered model of selfhood, each supported by different types of memory and cognitive processing. These layers interact dynamically, enabling a person to construct, experience, and express their identity over time and across situations. First, we have the ecological self, which is the self in direct perception and action in the here and now present. Then we have the interpersonal self, which represents the self in social interaction, our awareness of being seen, responded to, and evaluated by others. Next comes the extended self, the self that persists over time, stretching from remembered past to anticipated future. And lastly, we have the conceptual self, the abstract, reflective understanding of who we are, our traits, values, and morals. This helped to establish that memory is not just about facts or past events, but is essential for maintaining a coherent sense of self. It showed that memory serves the needs of the present self and isn't only concerned with the storage of the past. This idea prefigured research in motivated memory, where people recall or suppress experiences depending on their goals, values, and current identity. These studies transformed preconceived notions about memory. Neisser debunked the then accepted myth that flashbulb memories were photogenic accounts of an event and instead reshaped memory as a dynamic and reconstructive process. It influenced forensic science, how eyewitness testimony was evaluated, and became the foundation of future research into false memory syndrome, trauma, and PTSD. In addition, Dean's testimony reflected how we often fill in memory gaps with what we expect would have happened, and that high confidence does not necessarily equate to high accuracy. In the case of selfhood, it shifted the study of memory from mechanical metaphors to a deeper, human-centered understanding of memory as an identity in action, and would go on to inspire the development of narrative psychology. It also significantly advanced the study of autobiographical memory and influenced future therapeutic practices such as CBT and trauma therapy. One of Neisser's final major contributions centered on intelligence and group differences. In 1995, he was commissioned by the American Psychological Association to lead a task force to provide a scientific, unbiased assessment of what the field actually knew about intelligence and group differences. This was right on the heels of heated debates surrounding the bell curve controversies' take on IQ, race, and genetics. Neisser led efforts to clarify what intelligence is, what it isn't, and how much we truly understand about group disparities. He found that intelligence is not a single thing, but a complex construct composed of many different aspects. IQ tests are useful tools, but they do not measure all forms of intelligence. Group differences exist, but there is not definitive evidence and the differences are not well understood. Environmental factors play a significant role. Neisser also discovered what became known as the Flynn effect. Average IQ scores had risen significantly across the globe over the years. This improvement was likely due to better nutrition, education, healthcare, environmental complexity, such as media and technology, and less childhood disease. These findings implied that IQ is highly malleable, and environmental factors matter more than many had assumed. Neisser's research helped further define intelligence and inform policy on using IQ testing. It also reformed education, reinforced the need for early intervention, and boosted efforts to broaden definitions of intelligence overall. So, what are my thoughts on Dr. Ulric Neisser? Well, I deeply appreciate how he evolved his models over the years to move from a less mechanical framework of the human mind to a more interactive and fluid perspective. He truly challenged the zeitgeist of his time and offered the field of psychology a new way to study memory, perception, and cognitive thinking. Neisser was willing to change his mindset, a feat most people aren't willing to do. He openly critiqued his own earlier laboratory-centric methods and adopted a naturalistic approach to studying behavior that would go on to influence many others to do the same. I understand now why he has been called the father of cognitive psychology. As someone considering going into the field of neuropsychology or cognitive behavioral therapy myself, I've found immense significance in researching Neisser and learned a lot from the seeds he's planted in understanding the way the human mind functions. I'd like to end with a closing quote about Neisser, written by a fellow colleague after the doctor's passing. Neisser always thought of himself as an outsider challenging psychology to move forward. He worked to create an alternative to behaviorism. He then tried to make sure that cognitive psychology was concerned with meaningful problems. And that concludes my presentation. Included are all the wonderful references that helped me create this video, and thank you so much to everyone for watching.